Tasha Monroe's latest novel, The Echo of Etheria, wasn't just a book, it was a cultural phenomenon. It had spent 12 consecutive weeks at the top of the New York Times bestseller list, a feat that had turned the quiet, introspective author into a household name. But as Tasha walked toward the pristine, sun-drenched facade of Sterling Books, a bookstore so prestigious its name was whispered with a certain reverence in literary circles, she had no idea that the very success that brought her here would be the source of a deeply painful public humiliation. She had arrived a full hour early, a habit born from a life lived by deadlines and a quiet need to acclimate herself to the energy of a new space before facing a crowd. Today was a big day, the final stop on her nationwide tour, and the magnitude of it, the sheer weight of expectation, felt heavier than usual. She stepped inside the grand double doors, a wave of cool, air-conditioned air washing over her, carrying the familiar scent of old paper and new possibilities. A young woman with a clipboard and a meticulously neat ponytail stood behind a mahogany podium. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The silence of the bookstore was almost sacramental, broken only by the quiet rustle of pages and the distant murmur of a coffee machine. Tasha, dressed in a simple, elegant ivory blouse and dark trousers, felt a flicker of nervous excitement. She moved toward the podium, a soft, expectant smile on her face. "Hi," she said, her voice a low, melodic tone. "I'm Tasha Monroe. I'm here for the signing." The young woman, whose name tag read Chloe, didn't look up from her clipboard. "The doors don't open for another 45 minutes. You'll need to wait outside with everyone else." Her tone was flat, dismissive, as if Tasha's presence was an inconvenience. Tasha's smile wavered, but she kept her composure. "I understand, but I'm the author. I just wanted to get settled before the crowd arrives." This time, Chloe did look up, her eyes, a pale, steely blue, sweeping over Tasha with a clinical, appraising gaze. Her expression hardened. "Look, ma'am, I've told you. There's a line forming already. You can't just try to sneak in. Everyone has to follow the rules." Her voice was now louder, carrying a note of thinly veiled annoyance. A few heads turned in their direction, drawn by the rising tension. A knot began to form in the pit of Tasha's stomach. "I promise I'm not trying to sneak in," she said, her voice remaining calm, though a tremor of frustration was starting to build. "My name is Tasha Monroe. I'm the author of The Echo of Etheria. I'm scheduled to be here." Chloe's lip curled in a disbelieving smirk. "Right. And I'm the Queen of England. Listen, we have a very clear protocol for all our events. The author, Ms. Monroe, will be arriving through a private entrance. We have her picture, and you, ma'am, are not her." Chloe's gaze lingered for a beat too long on Tasha's skin, a casual dismissal that cut deeper than any words. It was a look Tasha knew all too well, one that saw a person not for who they were, but for what their skin color and casual attire suggested they must be. The indignity of the moment was beginning to feel heavy. A security guard, a hulking man with a perpetually stern expression, now approached the podium. His presence felt like a physical manifestation of Chloe's judgment. "Is there a problem here, Chloe?" he rumbled, his eyes fixed on Tasha. "Yes, she's trying to get in before the store opens, claiming she's the author," Chloe said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I've asked her to wait outside, but she's being difficult." Tasha felt a flush of heat rise up her neck. "I'm not being difficult. I'm telling you who I am. Can you please call someone, maybe the store manager, to verify?" The plea was a last-ditch effort to maintain her dignity in the face of their collective assumptions. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises immediately," the security guard said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "This is private property." Outside, the crowd of expectant fans was growing. A few people peered through the glass doors, their faces etched with curiosity as they watched the unfolding scene. Tasha could feel their stares, their quiet judgments, 1,000 tiny pinpricks of shame. The humiliation was no longer a private matter, but a public spectacle. "I have my ID," Tasha said, her voice low and tight with a building sense of injustice. "My driver's license has my name on it." Chloe scoffed. "And what? You think a driver's license proves you're a New York Times best-selling author? Please, we have thousands of people who come through here, and they all have some story. The line is outside, ma'am." The security guard took a step forward, his hand resting on Tasha's arm in a clear gesture of escorting her out. It was a physical violation, a touch that stripped her of her agency and her identity. Tasha flinched, pulling her arm away sharply. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice now a sharp, controlled edge. The soft, melodic tone was gone, replaced by the steely resolve of a woman who had been pushed too far. Just as the guard was about to take another step, the double doors of Sterling Books swung open, and a woman in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit and a striking emerald green scarf rushed in. Her face was a mask of panic, her eyes scanning the room. This was Veronica Hayes, Tasha's publisher's rep, a woman who lived and breathed deadlines and author care. Veronica's eyes landed on the scene at the podium, her panic turning to sheer disbelief. She saw the security guard looming, Chloe with her disdainful smirk, and Tasha, her shoulders held impossibly straight, a quiet storm raging in her dark eyes. Veronica's face went from pale to ashen. "Tasha?" she said, her voice a gasp of pure shock. Tasha's gaze met hers, a silent exchange that spoke volumes. The humiliation of the past few minutes was washed away by the relief of being seen, of being recognized. "What is going on here?" Veronica demanded, striding forward with a purpose that made the security guard visibly shrink back. She didn't wait for an answer. She turned to Tasha, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, Tasha, I am so sorry. The driver got stuck in traffic and I couldn't get a hold of you. I had no idea you'd be here early." Chloe's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of dawning horror. Her eyes darted between the famed publisher's rep and the woman she had just summarily dismissed as an imposter. The color drained from her face, leaving her with the sickly pallor of someone who had just made a colossal, career-ending mistake. The security guard, now fully aware of his gaffe, backed away slowly, as if trying to erase his presence from the scene. A small crowd of early bird fans, now at the doors, began to buzz with a mixture of confusion and recognition. A few people pulled out their phones, their cameras already trained on the dramatic scene. The click of a camera flash was like the crack of a whip. The first video was being recorded, capturing a moment that would soon be seen by millions. The store manager, a harried-looking woman named Brenda, rushed out from a back office, drawn by the commotion. She took in the sight of Veronica Hayes, a legend in publishing circles, looking furious, and a visibly upset Tasha Monroe. Her face crumpled. "Veronica, Tasha, what is the meaning of this?" she asked, though the answer was already terribly clear. "The meaning, Brenda, is that your staff just tried to kick a New York Times best-selling author out of her own book signing," Veronica said, her voice low and dangerously calm. "They insulted her, refused to believe her, and called security on her. This is beyond unprofessional. This is a disgrace." Brenda's apologies were a torrent of stammering, half-formed sentences. "I am so sorry, Ms. Monroe. This is a terrible mistake, a complete misunderstanding. Chloe, you're fired," she said, her voice shaky as she turned to her terrified employee. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. We'll set up the signing immediately. We have everything ready." But it was too late. The damage was done, the trust shattered. Tasha looked at the meticulously arranged signing table, the carefully stacked copies of The Echo of Etheria, and felt a profound sense of hollowness. The space, once full of promise, was now tainted by a bitterness that she couldn't ignore. She shook her head. "No," she said, her voice quiet but firm, cutting through Brenda's desperate pleas. "I won't be doing the signing here." Veronica looked at her, understanding in her eyes. "Tasha, are you sure?" "I'm sure," Tasha said. The humiliation had been public, and her response had to be as well. It couldn't be swept under a rug of empty apologies. She looked out at the faces pressed against the glass, their phones held high, recording. She knew what was coming next. "We're moving the signing," she announced, her voice projected to be heard by everyone outside. "There's a wonderful Black-owned bookstore just down the street, called The Written Word. We'll be there in 30 minutes. Anyone who wants a signed copy, please meet us there." A cheer went up from the crowd outside. The news spread like wildfire, a ripple of excitement turning into a wave. The fans, their loyalty now cemented by the injustice they had just witnessed, followed Tasha and Veronica down the street. The cameras remained on, the footage of a best-selling author, slighted and dismissed, walking with her head held high to a place that would truly welcome her, a powerful visual statement. The Written Word was a smaller, cozier place, filled with the warmth of mismatched armchairs and the comforting scent of rich coffee and spices. The owner, a kind-faced woman named Josephine, looked surprised to see the impromptu parade approaching her doors, a whirlwind of cameras and a famous author. When Tasha explained what had happened, Josephine's face filled with a mixture of anger and fierce pride. She immediately cleared a space in the center of her store, pulling out a small table and a folding chair. The signing began, not with the sterile formality of Sterling Books, but with the heartfelt intimacy of a family gathering. Fans lined up, their faces filled with support, and they didn't just ask Tasha to sign their books. They told her how much her work meant to them, how proud they were of her. The atmosphere was a palpable contrast to the cold dismissal she had experienced moments earlier. Word of the incident spread faster than a spark in a dry forest. The video, titled "New York Times Best-Selling Author Kicked Out of Bookstore," went viral within hours. The footage, shot from multiple angles, showed Tasha's calm composure, the staff's dismissive arrogance, and the triumphant walk to the written word. The internet, with its swift, unforgiving justice, weighed in with a fury. Sterling Books' social media accounts were flooded with one-star reviews and furious comments. The hashtag support Tasha Monroe trended for days. The following morning, Tasha woke up to a ringing phone and an inbox full of emails from her publicist. The news was staggering. Not only had the book sales tripled overnight, but the demand was so high that her publisher had to authorize a new print run, a rare occurrence for a book already this late in its life cycle. The incident, a moment of profound public pain, had been transformed into a catalyst for an even greater success, a testament to the power of community and the collective will to fight against injustice. The story was not about being kicked out of a bookstore anymore. It was about finding a home where you were truly celebrated, and in doing so, creating a movement. In the days and weeks that followed, Tasha's life was a whirlwind of interviews and public appearances, each one a chance to reclaim her narrative. She spoke not with anger, but with a quiet, powerful clarity. She didn't just talk about the incident at Sterling Books, she spoke about the deeper systemic issue it represented. She used her platform to highlight the importance of supporting Black-owned businesses, to talk about the often invisible biases that people of color face every day, and to champion the idea that true success is not measured by the prestige of the stage you're on, but by the authenticity of the people you share it with. The story of the Sterling Books incident became a touchstone, a powerful symbol of a larger conversation happening across the country. The bookstore's reputation was irrevocably damaged, its legacy forever tied to a moment of institutional prejudice. The written word, on the other hand, flourished. The local community rallied around Josephine's bookstore, and it became a hub not just for books, but for community events, readings, and a safe space for difficult but necessary conversations. For Tasha, The experience changed her in ways she hadn't anticipated. The initial sting of humiliation had faded, replaced by a quiet strength. She had faced a public trial by fire and had emerged not just unscathed, but stronger, more resilient. The experience had peeled back a layer of her own vulnerability, forcing her to confront a reality that she had, in some ways, been able to keep at arm's length through her writing. She had always poured her emotions into her characters, into the fantastical worlds she created. But now, the raw, unfiltered emotions of her own life had become the fuel for her next creative journey. Months later, Tasha was sitting in her sun-drenched home office, the scent of lavender and old paper filling the air. She was working on her next book, a project that was no longer just a story, but a reflection of her own lived experience. The themes of her new work were deeper, more nuanced, and more personal. It was a story about a character who, like her, had been dismissed and underestimated, and who had found their power not in proving their worth to others, but in claiming it for themselves. She looked at her calendar, a quiet, satisfied smile on her face. Her next book signing tour was scheduled to begin in a few months, and her first stop was already booked. It was at the Written Word, a place that now felt not just like a bookstore, but like home. She had made a new rule for herself and her team. All her future signings would take place exclusively at independent, minority-owned bookstores. It was her way of ensuring that the story she had lived would serve as a permanent catalyst for change, a legacy of defiance and hope. The incident had not defined her, it had refined her. It had taken a moment of public pain and turned it into a public declaration of purpose, a commitment to using her voice and her platform to lift others up, just as her community had lifted her. The story of the Echo of Etheria had ended with its protagonist finding their voice and their place in the world. Tasha Monroe's own story, in many ways, was just beginning, a testament to the idea that sometimes the most challenging moments in life are not ends, but beginnings, and that the greatest triumphs are often born from the ashes of a moment of profound injustice. She had been kicked out of a store, but in that moment, she had walked into her own destiny, a destiny of purpose and power that was far greater than any bestseller list. Her story had truly just begun. The media frenzy surrounding the Sterling Books incident had not waned. In fact, it had intensified, becoming a national conversation on race, privilege, and the subtle, insidious ways bias can manifest in everyday life. Tasha had become an accidental activist, a role she wore with a mix of grace and weary determination. Her agent, a shrewd and fiercely protective woman named Diane, worked tirelessly to manage the influx of interview requests, speaking engagements, and brand partnerships. Tasha used every opportunity to shift the focus from her personal experience to the larger issues at play. In a televised interview with a prominent journalist, she spoke about the importance of literacy, of supporting diverse authors and publishers, and of making sure that stories from all backgrounds were given the space to be heard. "What happened to me was unfortunate," Tasha said, her voice steady and calm as she looked directly into the camera. "But it was not unique. It's a story that plays out every single day, in big ways and small ways. I was lucky. I had a platform, and I had people who saw me. So many people don't. My hope is that my experience serves as a mirror for people to look at the world and ask themselves, am I really seeing the person in front of me, or am I just seeing a reflection of my own assumptions?" The quote went viral, shared and retweeted 1,000,000 times over. It was a powerful statement of accountability, a gentle but firm push for introspection. Her public image shifted from being just a talented author to being a thought leader, a powerful voice for change. Her fans, a legion of devoted readers, responded with a kind of fierce loyalty that was both humbling and inspiring. They didn't just buy her books, They became her advocates, her protectors, and her street team, spreading her message and defending her online from the inevitable backlash and criticism. Amidst the chaos, Tasha found a quiet center in her work. The words flowed more easily now, imbued with a new sense of purpose. She was writing for a reason that felt bigger than herself. Her new novel, tentatively titled The Unseen Weight, was a departure from the fantastical world of Etheria. It was a contemporary story about a black woman navigating the subtle aggressions and outright discrimination of the corporate world. The protagonist, a brilliant architect named Lena, was a reflection of the many women Tasha had met and heard from since the incident, women who had been told they were not seen, not heard, not valued. The story felt raw and real, a cathartic release of the emotions she had been holding back for years. She was weaving her own pain and the pain of her community into a tapestry of resilience and strength, creating a work that was both a reckoning and a testament. A few months after the incident, a new chapter unfolded for Tasha and for Sterling Books. The Bookstore, reeling from the sustained public outrage and the significant loss of business, made a desperate attempt at damage control. Brenda, the manager, was no longer with the company. The owner, a man named Gerald, issued a public apology, not just for the incident, but for the systemic failures that had allowed it to happen. He announced a new initiative, a series of workshops and training sessions for all employees on diversity, inclusion, and unconscious bias. He also announced that Sterling Books would be dedicating a significant portion of its display space to books by Black authors and other authors of color, and that it would be partnering with local, Black-owned bookstores to co-host events and support their programming. It was a clear, if belated, attempt to right a terrible wrong, to rebuild a broken trust. For Tasha, the apology was a complex thing. She was not a vindictive person, and she took no pleasure in the store's downfall. But she also knew that an apology, without genuine change, was just a gesture. She watched from a distance, curious to see if Sterling Books' promises would be more than just words. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Tasha received an email from Josephine at the Written Word. The subject line read, "An unusual request." When Tasha opened the email, she found a carefully worded message from Gerald, the owner of Sterling Books. He was asking if she would consider meeting with him, not to apologize again, but to talk. He wanted her insight, her guidance, on how to make the changes at his store real and lasting. He wasn't asking for her forgiveness, he was asking for her help. Tasha was wary. Her first instinct was to say no. Why should she help the very institution that had caused her so much public pain? But then she thought of Lena, the protagonist of her new book. She thought of all the people who were rooting for her, the community she had found at the Written Word. She realized that she had an opportunity to do something more than just walk away. She could be a part of the solution. She could hold him accountable, not with anger, but with the quiet authority of a person who had seen the worst of his institution and had the power to make it better. She wrote back, agreeing to the meeting, on one condition: they meet at the Written Word. The meeting was a tense affair. Gerald was a man in his late 60s, with a hangdog expression and a profound sense of shame radiating from him. He was clearly out of his element, sitting in a cozy, cluttered bookstore that felt a world away from the sterile grandeur of his own. Josephine sat with Tasha, a silent but powerful presence, her hands clasped on her lap. Gerald stammered his way through a few initial apologies, and Tasha cut him off gently. "Mr. Gerald," she said, "I'm not here for an apology. We moved past that. I'm here because you asked for my help. So tell me, what is it you want to do?" He took a deep breath, visibly steeling himself. "I want to change the culture of my store. I want to make sure that what happened to you never happens to anyone else. We've already started the training, but it feels like a checklist. I want it to be real, I want my employees to see beyond their assumptions." Tasha listened, her mind already racing with ideas. She spoke for the next 20 minutes, her voice a low, passionate hum. She talked about the importance of hiring a more diverse staff at all levels, not just entry-level positions. She spoke about the need for mentorship programs, for partnerships with local schools and community centers. She suggested that Sterling Books create a reading series that exclusively featured debut authors from marginalized communities, giving them a platform they might not otherwise get. She proposed a Bookstore Ambassador program, where a new hire would spend their first month rotating through different roles, learning the entire business from the ground up, and that those hires should be intentional in their diversity. She also suggested that Sterling Books invest in local, independent, and minority-owned bookstores, offering financial support for their events and programming. She wasn't just fixing a problem, she was building a bridge. Gerald listened intently, scribbling notes on a pad of paper. When she was finished, he looked up at her, his eyes filled with a new kind of respect. "Ms. Monroe, you've given me more in 20 minutes than my entire team of consultants has given me in months. Thank you." Tasha simply nodded. "Now it's up to you to see it through," she said. The meeting concluded, and Gerald left with a new sense of purpose. A weight lifted from his shoulders, and a long road ahead of him. The partnership with Sterling Books became a quiet part of Tasha's life, a testament to her willingness to turn her pain into progress. She didn't seek the spotlight for it. She just did the work, consulting with Gerald and his team, guiding them toward a more inclusive future. The changes were slow, but they were real. The next time Tasha walked past Sterling Books, a new display in the window caught her eye. It was a tribute to local Black authors, and at the very center, on a raised pedestal, was a worn, much-loved copy of The Echo of Etheria. She smiled to herself, a quiet, knowing smile. Months turned into a year. The Unseen Weight was published to critical acclaim and, predictably, shot to the top of the bestseller lists. The book's themes of resilience and quiet strength resonated with readers in a way that felt more personal than her last novel. The signing tour was different this time. It was a celebration, a victory lap. The first stop was, of course, the written word. The line snaked down the street, but this time it was filled with faces of every background, united by their love for Tasha's work and their appreciation for what she stood for. As she signed a copy for a young girl with bright, hopeful eyes, Tasha felt a surge of emotion. She had been through a public humiliation that could have broken her, a moment that had felt like a descent into the very darkest parts of the world. But instead, it had become the beginning of a journey. She had found a community, used her voice to create change, and transformed her pain into art. The story of Tasha Monroe, the author who was kicked out of a bookstore, had become a legend, a testament to the power of a single person's resolve. She had been dismissed, but in that moment, she had claimed her own power, and in doing so, had written a new chapter for herself, for her community, and for the world. Her journey had not been about reaching a destination, but about the strength found in the walking and the courage it took to stand tall, even when the world told you to shrink. Tasha's new book tour was less a series of signings and more a celebratory march. The first stop, as promised, was the written word. The line of people stretched for 2 city blocks, a vibrant, diverse river of faces. Young and old, Black, white, Asian, and Latino. They had all come for Tasha, not just for her words, but for what she represented. Inside, the store was humming with a joyous, communal energy. Josephine, the owner, moved through the crowd like a proud host, her face glowing with a mixture of disbelief and deep satisfaction. As Tasha sat at the small, sturdy table Josephine had set up for her, she felt a profound sense of homecoming. She signed books, but she also shared conversations, listened to stories, and exchanged smiles that were more than just polite. A young woman with a face full of freckles and a nervous tremor in her hands approached the table. She clutched a well-worn copy of The Echo of Etheria. "I just wanted to thank you," the woman said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm a writer too, and I've been so scared. What happened to you? And how you handled it? It gave me the courage to keep going, to tell my own stories." Tasha took her hand, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Your voice is important," she said, her tone firm and gentle. "Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." That night, Tasha went home and felt the weight of it all settle in a different way. It wasn't the burden of shame, but the weight of responsibility. She was no longer just an author. She was a symbol. The quiet, solitary existence she had always cherished was gone, replaced by a very public purpose. She found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. Her family had always been a source of unwavering strength. She thought of her grandmother, Lena, a woman who had taught her the power of her own story. Lena had been a quiet but powerful force in their small community, a storyteller who could weave a history lesson into a bedtime story and a protest song into a lullaby. Tasha's love for words, for narrative, for the hidden histories and untold truths had all been sparked by her grandmother. Lena had a saying, one she would repeat often as she braided Tasha's hair on the porch swing. "You carry the weight of 1,000 voices, Tasha. Never let anyone silence yours." It was a simple phrase, but it had rooted itself deep in Tasha's soul. As a child, she had thought it was a metaphor for a family legacy. Now, she understood it was a literal, spiritual truth. She was carrying not just her own voice, but the hopes and struggles of so many others who saw themselves in her. The next leg of the tour took her across the country, from a vibrant community center in Chicago to a small, independent bookstore in Portland. The tour was a series of triumphs, each event a testament to the power of community and the collective desire for change. But with the triumphs came new challenges. Not everyone was celebrating her. The internet, a place of both fierce support and bitter hatred, was now home to a new wave of attacks. Tasha began to be targeted by critics who claimed her success was not due to her talent, but to a calculated performance of victimhood. They called her a race baiter, a divisive figure, and accused her of exploiting the incident for financial gain. The comments were ugly, a venomous current running beneath the surface of her public success. For a moment, the word stung, a familiar poison trying to seep into her resolve. She remembered the dismissive gaze of the young woman at Sterling Books, the way her worth had been so casually reduced to her skin color. These new attacks felt like a more insidious, digital version of that same prejudice. They were trying to strip her of her agency, to tell her that her success was not earned, but given to her as a form of social currency. But she had a new armor now. She had the support of her community, the quiet strength of her grandmother's memory, and the powerful, steady presence of her friend and confidant, Marcus. Marcus was a musician and an old friend from college, a grounding force who had seen Tasha through every high and low of her career. He was a man of few words, but his presence was a deep well of support. He would listen to her vent about the latest online vitriol, his calm, steady gaze a silent reminder that the digital noise was just that, noise. "They're trying to put you in a box," he told her one night over the phone, his voice a low rumble. "A box they've already labeled. You're not the victim. You're not the aggressor. You're the one who walked away and built something new. That scares them, because it means they don't have control of the narrative. And that's what this is all about. Tasha, control." His words resonated deeply. He was right. She wasn't just reacting to what had happened. She was creating something new from the wreckage. She decided to stop engaging with the online hatred. She turned her focus to her work, to the new partnerships she was building, and to the people who were showing up for her, both in person and online. She realized that her power lay not in fighting every battle, but in choosing the ones that mattered, in building a world where a story like hers didn't have to happen in the first place. This realization led to a new project, an idea that had been simmering in the back of her mind. She decided to launch a nonprofit foundation. The Tasha Monroe Foundation for Literary Arts would be dedicated to providing grants, mentorship, and publishing opportunities for aspiring authors from underrepresented backgrounds. She had secured funding from a few of her high-profile friends and a few key donors who had been moved by her story. It was a way of turning her public platform into a tangible, lasting resource, a way of extending her own hand to lift up the next generation of voices. The news of the foundation was met with overwhelming support. It was a clear, unambiguous statement of purpose. It was not about her, it was about the community. It was about creating a pipeline of talent, about building a literary landscape that was truly representative of the world we live in. The announcement was a masterstroke, a move that silenced her critics and solidified her place as a leader in the literary world. Around this time, a new and unexpected development unfolded. Tasha received a letter, a handwritten, hesitant note from someone named Marcus Finch. It took her a moment to place the name. Then, with a jolt of recognition, she remembered. He was the security guard at Sterling Books. The letter was a simple, heartfelt apology. He spoke of his shame, of how he had seen the viral video and realized the profound mistake he had made. He had been so caught up in the rules, in his own role, that he had failed to see her as a person. He didn't ask for forgiveness, only to express his regret and to tell her that her story had changed him. He had quit his job at Sterling Books and was now working as a security guard at a local community center, where he felt he was serving a purpose, not just enforcing a rule. Tasha read the letter several times, a mixture of emotions swirling within her. She was touched by his humility, by his willingness to own his mistake. It was a reminder that even in the most painful moments, there was a possibility for growth and change. She decided to write him back, a brief note of gratitude, acknowledging his apology and wishing him well on his new path. It was a quiet closure, a private moment of healing that felt more significant than all the public apologies in the world. A year to the day of the Sterling Books incident, Tasha was invited to give a keynote address at a major literary conference. The conference was held in the same city, just a few blocks away from where it all began. The invitation had come from a committee that included Gerald, the owner of Sterling Books, who had made good on his promise to transform his store. He had fired the manager and had since promoted a black woman named Patrice to the position, a woman who had worked for him for years but had been overlooked for promotions in the past. Sterling Books was now a different place, a more welcoming, vibrant space, a testament to what real change looked like. Tasha stood on the stage, the bright lights of the auditorium shining on her, and looked out at the sea of faces. She saw journalists, students, fellow authors, and fans. She saw her agent Diane and her friend Marcus in the front row, their faces a mix of pride and admiration. She also saw Gerald in the audience, his expression one of quiet reverence. She began her speech not with a flourish, but with a quiet, powerful reflection on the day that had changed everything. She spoke of the young woman at the podium, of the security guard, of the casual dismissal that had been so painful. She didn't speak with bitterness or anger, but with a profound sense of clarity, as if she were a narrator telling a story that had happened to someone else. "For a long time," she said, her voice carrying a deep, resonant quality, "I thought that moment was about me, about my book, about my career. But I've come to realize it wasn't. It was about a mirror that was held up to a society that often doesn't see. That day, I wasn't just Tasha Monroe, the author. I was an idea, an assumption. And when a person is reduced to an assumption, their humanity is erased." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I'm grateful for that day," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "I'm grateful for the pain, for the public humiliation, because it forced me to see my own power. It forced me to see that my voice, my story, was not just my own. It was a part of something bigger. It was a part of a collective narrative of resilience, of defiance, of hope." She ended her speech by speaking about the future. She spoke of the importance of telling stories that had been silenced, of creating spaces where everyone felt seen, and of the responsibility that came with having a platform. The audience rose to its feet in a thunderous standing ovation. The applause was a roaring wave of gratitude and respect. After the conference, Tasha walked through the city, the cool night air a welcome relief. She passed by Sterling Books, its windows glowing with a soft, inviting light. She saw people inside, browse, chatting with the staff. She saw a young black woman working at the podium, a warm, welcoming smile on her face as she greeted a customer. She saw a new display in the window, showcasing a diverse collection of authors. She walked on, her mind replaying the events of the last year. She had been kicked out of a bookstore, a moment that had seemed like a personal tragedy. But in that moment, she had been given a gift. She had been given a chance to turn her pain into purpose, her shame into power. She had written her own story, not just on the page, but in the world, and it was a story of hope, resilience, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserves to be seen, to be heard, and to be celebrated for NYT. Exactly who they are. Her story had truly just begun, and it was a masterpiece. The triumphant echo of the applause from the conference hall still hummed in Tasha's ears as she walked, the feeling a potent mix of elation and exhaustion. She had given her heart, her truth, on that stage, and the response had been more than she could have ever hoped for. The night air was cool, a welcome contrast to the warmth of the spotlight, and she felt a sense of purpose that was both invigorating and heavy. She was no longer just the author of a book, but the architect of a new future for other writers. The Tasha Monroe Foundation was not just an idea. It was a living, breathing entity, and it demanded her constant attention. The demands began immediately. The morning after the speech, her phone was a symphony of buzzing notifications and unread messages. Her publicist, her agent, the foundation's new director, all were reaching out with a flurry of follow-up tasks. She had interviews to schedule, grant applications to review, and new partnerships to consider. Each conversation was a promise, a new layer of responsibility she felt a deep, moral obligation to fulfill. She was building something that was bigger than her, and the gravity of that mission consumed her. In the midst of this whirlwind, Marcus became a quiet, distant banker. He was still there, of course. He'd text her funny memes, send her links to new music he was working on, and call her late at night when the world was quiet. But the rhythm of their friendship had changed. She was no longer just a call away. She was now on a schedule, her time a finite resource to be managed and allocated. Their casual, meandering conversations, once a staple of her life, became shorter, more transactional. "Can't talk now, Marcus. I have a call in 2 minutes. I'm sorry, I'll call you back later. I'm just reviewing a legal brief." She was always multitasking, her mind 1,000 places at once, and it showed in her hurried, distracted tone. Marcus, a man who lived his life by the unhurried cadence of his own creative flow, was a stark contrast to Tasha's new, frenetic pace. He spent his days in his small recording studio, lost in the intricate world of sound design and melody. His creative process was a slow, deliberate one, and he thrived on quiet moments and long, uninterrupted conversations. He wasn't a person who could be slotted into a 5-minute window, and he felt the shift in their dynamic acutely. He was fiercely proud of Tasha, of her courage and her success, but he also felt a deep sense of loneliness. He was watching his best friend become a public figure, a woman he admired from afar, but he was losing the intimate connection he had always treasured. He felt like a spectator in her new life, a passive audience to her triumphs, and it was a quiet, painful isolation. The strain came to a head on a Friday night, a night they had promised to keep sacred for just the two of them. Marcus had made her favorite meal, a spicy shrimp pasta, and had lit candles, creating a quiet, peaceful atmosphere in his apartment. He had a new song he wanted to play for her, a melody that he felt finally captured the complex emotions of the last year. Tasha arrived an hour late, her face pale with exhaustion, her eyes still glued to her phone. She was on a conference call, her voice low and efficient as she discussed the final logistics of a new partnership. "I am so sorry, Marcus," she said, finally ending the call with a sigh. "The foundation is partnering with a major publisher, and we're planning a new mentorship program. It's huge, but the details are a nightmare." She plopped down on the couch, her shoulders slumping. Marcus's smile was thin, a mask he wore to hide his disappointment. "It's fine," he said, the words feeling brittle in his mouth. "Food's ready. I'll just reheat it." They ate in a tense silence, broken only by the occasional ping of Tasha's phone. She would glance at it, a flicker of anxiety in her eyes, as if afraid she was missing something. Finally, Marcus couldn't take it anymore. He put his fork down with a quiet clatter. "Can you just—" he began, his voice low. "Can you just put the phone away? Just for dinner?" Tasha looked up, startled, as if she had forgotten he was there. "Marcus, I can't. This is all happening so fast. I have to stay on top of it. This isn't just about me anymore." "I know it's not about you anymore," he said, his voice rising, a sharp, uncharacteristic edge to it. "That's the problem. It's never about you. It's about the foundation. It's about the mission. It's about the legacy. What about Tasha? What about the girl who used to get so lost in a book she'd forget to eat? What about the friend who used to listen to me play for hours without a single distraction?" Tasha's face hardened, a wall of defensiveness rising around her. "I'm still that person, Marcus. I'm just doing important work now. I'm trying to make a difference, trying to ensure that what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else." "I know," he said, his voice now a quiet, pained whisper. "I'm proud of you. I'm so proud of you. But I feel like I have to book an appointment just to talk to you. I feel like our friendship is just another line on your to-do list." He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "You're so busy saving the world, you've forgotten to live in it." The words hung in the air between them, a final, definitive blow. Tasha felt a flush of indignation, a flash of righteous anger. How could he not understand? How could he be so selfish? But as she looked at his face, at the raw hurt in his eyes, her anger evaporated, replaced by a sudden, cold wave of truth. She saw herself through his eyes, a woman always on the move, always on her phone, always just out of reach. She saw how she had been so consumed by the idea of being a symbol that she had forgotten to be a human being. She had been so busy creating a legacy for the world that she had neglected the small, sacred legacy of her own life, the one that was rooted in the quiet, loving intimacy of her closest relationships. The silence that followed was a long, uncomfortable one, filled with the unspoken words of a year's worth of missed connections and quiet hurts. It was a mirror held up to her, a reflection of the person she had become, a person she barely recognized. The argument didn't end their friendship, but it shattered the comfortable illusion she had been living in. It was a wake-up call, a painful but necessary reminder that true purpose was not just about the grand public gestures, but about the small, private ones, the ones that held her most cherished relationships together. The foundation could change the world, but her friendship with Marcus was the anchor that kept her from floating away. She had been so busy trying to be a beacon of hope for strangers that she had almost left the most important person in her life in the dark. The realization was a humbling and sobering one. A powerful reminder that the greatest acts of courage often happen not on a stage in front of 1,000 people, but in a quiet room with a single honest conversation. The work of changing the world was a long, difficult one, but she knew now that it had to start with her own heart and with the people she loved most.